welcome to episode 85 of the CRICKETher Weekly. I'm presenting this week because Raf's feeling a bit croaky after emceeing the Cricket Society Awards dinner lunch thing on Friday, when we presented quite a hatful of awards, didn't we, Raf? Or rather, various people much more than important than us presented the awards. So who did we present awards to?
Yeah, it was a really nice event, and there were a lot of awards presented, partly because we haven't been able to have the event since, I think the last one was March 2019, so it was quite a long time ago. There was an award for, it's the most promising young female cricketer award, and the winner was actually for 2019. It was Freya Davies. If you can remember back to 2019 when she took all those wickets in the final edition of the Kia Super League, so she was finally able to have that presented a little bit later than anticipated. And we also had a new award, which was a kind of, I think it was a sort of originally anticipated to be a one-off award for the best newcomer in the Rachel Hayhoe Flint Trophy for 2020, and that went to Charlotte Taylor of the Vipers. So you were a happy bunny, weren't you, Sid? You were reminiscing with her about various aspects of, you spoke about being nervous during the final, and she was like, yeah, well, I was waiting to come in and bat, so I was a bit nervous.
I was really nervous up there watching you guys, and she was like, you should just try just waiting to come in to bat, thinking you might have to go out and bat in that.
Anyway, her award was really for that spectacular performance in the final of the 2020 RHF, when she took all those wickets and really turned the match on its head, and so that was really nice to have that presented to her. And then there was also an award for Alice Cappsey on the day that she was presented with her first professional contract. So that was great timing, totally unplanned, and so exciting. Exciting for her, and that was for a new award as well, named after Charlotte Edwards, the Charlotte Edwards Award for the best schoolgirl cricketer in England, or something like that. So at the time that we announced the award originally, it was kind of the start of very much the start of her senior county career for Surrey, when she had a great season in 2019, and then subsequently events have rather overtaken us, and now she's kind of had this amazing meteoric rise. But that, that's nice. It's going to be kind of one of probably the earliest awards in her career, but certainly there'll be many more to come, many very prestigious awards, no doubt. So that was fun.
Absolutely. And while we were off doing that, obviously the season is properly underway in Australia, and WBBL is going on. They've just moved the whole circus to Perth, so the Scorchers are playing at home for the first time in a couple of years. And I was wrong. I thought they'd have to spend the whole season in Tasmania, but they have made it over back to the mainland. Is that what they call it in Australia? They call Perth the Australia proper the mainland?
I think that people in Western Australia think that they're like distinct from the rest of Australia, don't they? Is that a thing?
I think they do, yes. Anyway, so they're over in Perth, and more stuff is happening. And Grace Harris is now the leading run scorer. She's taken over the yellow cap from Rachel Priest. Grace Harris, we saw her play. Well, it wasn't actually her debut, but we saw her play for England against England, in the 2015 Ashes, and it felt like a really big deal at the time, and she felt like very much a player for the future. But then she played into 2016 and hasn't played for Australia since 2016. But still performing domestically. Why can't she get another gig for Australia, Raf?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and obviously we don't necessarily have an insight into the dynamics of what happens with selection. I suppose the obvious answer to that question is that there are loads of really brilliant players in Australia, loads of really brilliant batters, and therefore it's always going to be fierce competition for places. So that's one answer. I think the exciting thing that we felt watching her in that 2015 Ashes series was her ability to sort of hit sixes almost with her eyes closed and one arm tied behind her back. She just was very much one of those people who kind of pioneered the way a bit with power hitting. I think that there was some statistic I seem to remember at the time that in the couple of matches that she played in that series, she hit more sixes than the entire England team for the rest of the series put together, or something like that. So it's easy sometimes to overlook how quickly women's cricket has changed in a relatively short space of time in terms of the number of sixes that are hit. She was somebody who, in the very early days of six hitting in women's T20 cricket, she was really kind of showing the way and doing so with relative ease, and I think that's why we were very excited about her. England were a little bit behind Australia in terms of their power game, and did receive quite a lot of criticism for not hitting enough sixes around about that time, but certainly Grace Harris was ahead of the pack as far as Australia went, and I think what's happened is that other players have to some extent caught up with her as the coaching has improved and as their technique has improved, and maybe she's her technique maybe isn't quite as maybe
orthodox.
Well, yeah, I was going to say sophisticated, orthodox as some others who are now hitting plenty of sixes. I personally don't think that matters in the slightest. If you can whack it over the rope, then it doesn't really matter how you go about doing it. So yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, you think that the way that she's hitting runs at the moment, she must be in contention, but who knows? Who knows, Sid?
Yeah, and also contributing with the ball as well.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, and talking of bowling, so the leading bowler at the moment in terms of wickets taken is Jess Jonathan, but right behind her is Kim Garth, who's kind of re-broken through this season. Now, Kim Garth's been she's had a really fascinating career, actually. One of those ones when she gets around to the point of writing an autobiography will be an interesting one to read. So she's already won the BBL twice, or the WBBL, of course, with the Sydney Sixers. So she started off there as an overseas rookie. They had the overseas rookie program many years ago, and she ended up playing 2 seasons for the Sydney Sixers, got 2 winners' medals, and then decided to emigrate to Australia, left Ireland behind, and it's been more difficult for her since then, partly because she's been competing as an overseas player. So she's in the process of qualifying for Australia. I believe she'll be qualified next year to play as a local player, and indeed to actually play for Australia if things went particularly well for her. She'll be about 26 then, I think, at the point that she qualifies. But she's had the opportunity this year to kind of get in on WBBL. She's still playing as an overseas player, and she's taken a load of wickets. And she seems to have this thing of being able to bowl like the odd really good ball or the odd really good over. It has to be said that it's combined with some not quite so good balls and some not quite so good overs. So it's been very up and down, but what she has got is the ability to kind of turn out that magic ball, or even the way she's doing it, a couple of magic balls every match, and that's taking wickets and that's having an impact. And I think what that's showing is that you can kind of that there's a place for those players in the world where you can the kind of players that they will give away runs, they will bowl 5 not great balls, they will bowl a long hop outside off stump that gets carted straight through point for 4, but they will bowl that also unplayable delivery which gets wickets, and that's what she's doing. So good for her. And she's, I think, still got potentially 6 or 7 years left in her career to kind of make things count there, and to kind of hopefully she is now being rewarded for that kind of very brave leap that she made when she said, I'm going to leave Ireland behind and go and become an Australian. So yeah. So that's WBBL. Now, franchise tournaments. We're going to carry on the theme of franchise tournaments. We're going to talk about the Fair Break tournament. We've seen some announcements about this thing this week. What is it, and what's that all about? Well, in order to understand what the Fair Break is, you have to kind of go back in time. And you go back in time to before WBBL, before the Kia Super League as well. And something called the WICL, Women's International Cricket League, which we've talked about before on the CRICKETher Weekly. That was a plan to set up a franchise tournament for women that would operate all over the world. They were talking about maybe operating in Hong Kong and in Singapore and in London and in Sydney, and kind of taking a sort of circus around the world, a bit like the WTA do with tennis. Now, that didn't come to anything in the end, though, Raf. Why didn't that come to anything? And what's the relevance for talking about the Fair Break tournament now?
Yeah, well, I remember getting very excited around about the time that this was being discussed, which I think was about 2014 or so. And I remember going to some event and chatting to I won't say his name, but somebody very high up at the ECB at the time. And just saying, this is such a great idea. Wouldn't it be brilliant for some of the England women to go over and play in this and he was quite cross actually, and basically sounded off for about 10 minutes, and the outcome was, or the overall theme of what he was saying was, over my dead body will any of my England women players be going to play in this.
Yeah, I mean, we can't say who it was, but essentially his reaction was...
Very good impression there, Sid. Anyway, so, yeah, and that basically put paid to it, and I think that similar conversations were going on at other cricket boards, and then, as you've kind of said before, Cricket Australia essentially launched WBBL as a little bit as a response to this, really, going, well, we feel quite threatened by this and we're slightly concerned by it, so we're going to do our own, but it's going to be under our auspices and we're going to control it. So that kind of put paid to that. But what's really interesting about this new iteration is that it seems to have got ICC approval.
Yep. Yeah, so the ICC have approved them to go ahead, and they've announced two of their captains for this tournament that's going to take place in Hong Kong in May next year. So, and they've got a couple of big names, international captains, Sana Mir, who was Pakistan captain, and Harmanpreet Kaur. So, how have they been able to get these huge names, Raf?
Well, I guess that there's somebody bankrolling them, first of all, because somebody like Harmanpreet Kaur is not going to be doing this for an insignificant amount of money, you would think. So they've obviously got some financial support behind them, and they have now seemed to have somehow managed to politically gain acceptance by the ICC. I wonder whether there's an element of their vision for it is... slightly more limited in the sense of it's just going to be a kind of more of a one-off event, sort of maybe annually, but rather than having it as an ongoing rolling circus that you were talking about before, which was the original conception. So it will fit in around international cricket and around other kind of more established T20 franchise tournaments like the WBBL. So it will fit in around those. And the other thing that I think is potentially quite interesting is that does it show that there's a little bit of a changing power dynamic? Because certainly at the time on which the WICL was kind of first conceived in 2014, I think that Sean Martin perhaps underestimated the extent to which the board's work professionalism was very new, was very nascent, and he perhaps underestimated the extent to which the boards were still able to call the shot with the players, and the players didn't want to do anything to rock the boat. Is there now perhaps a slight shift in that, whereby the players have kind of, they feel a little bit more able to say, okay, well, I want to go and take part in this because it's quite important for me that I earn some money. So I don't know. I'm just sort of speculating here, really. But I do think it's very interesting because I do think that the situation's moved on somewhat in the past 7 years.
Yeah, and it'll be fascinating to see if any English players get to go and participate in that as well. So that's taking place next May in Hong Kong. The final weekend is going to be the 14th, 15th of May. So if you're not doing anything, if you've got nothing better to do on the 14th, 15th of May next year, then get along there. I don't think we've got anything better to do, have we, Raf, on the 14th, 15th of May next year?
Hey, Sid.
Yeah.
Remember when we booked our wedding? Remember the date?
Hey Alexa, can you cancel flights to Hong Kong? Yeah, it's going to be okay, Raf.
Good.
And on that bombshell, moving swiftly on. So we're going to stay still with franchise cricket tournaments, and kind of slightly relevant actually, because this Hong Kong tournament could of course turn into one of those tournaments a bit like the Abu Dhabi T10 tournament, and that's been in the news from a women's cricket perspective this week. It's a men's tournament, but it turns out that, reading the press release, Sarah Taylor is going to be doing some coaching, and she's the first woman ever to coach in men's cricket. Okay.
So that, yeah, they put out this press release and it's absolutely infuriating, and I'm now going to proceed to have a rant about it, despite my croaky voice. So they put something out that says that she's the first ever woman to coach in men's professional franchise cricket, and of course that's wrong, because the first woman to do that was Julia Price in the Big Bash League in Australia several years ago. And the reason why this is infuriating is because it would have been relatively easy for them to fact check this, and it seems like they just didn't even bother to do it. It's one of those things where people, again, they ignore the history. They ignore the fact that women's cricket and women have been coaching for more than the past 5 minutes. Yes, they've got this great big signing in Sarah Taylor, but do you really need to validate that and make people sit up and pay attention to that by going, oh, she's the first? You're forgetting about the people who came before, and it's just it makes me so cross when people do this and just don't take into account things that have happened more than 5 minutes ago. So that was more of a mini rant actually, but still it's very important that we do get things correct and that we are accurate when we claim something to be a first.
Absolutely. And finally this week we've had one big announcement from the England camp, that Fran Wilson has announced her retirement from international cricket. She had about an 11-year career, but an 11-year career that was slightly an odd one, Raf, wasn't it? Because she spent a lot longer than 40 days in the wilderness.
She did, yeah. She had a bit of a gap, didn't she? And then she moved county. She moved to Middlesex, and then she was kind of brought back into the England camp by Mark Robinson in 2016, I think it was, and then went on and was part of that team that won the World Cup in 2017. So it's been a long England career with a little bit of a gap in the middle. She certainly contributed in a number of ways, notably in her fielding, taken some very spectacular catches over the years. I think it's a little bit of a shame, really, the way that her career's ended, actually. It's been a difficult summer for her, I think. It's probably fair to say. She didn't play a match for England this summer, and she was put in the bubble for the duration of the multi-format series against India, and that was quite a long period, and because obviously it was the Test and the ODIs and the T20s, so she was put in that bubble but didn't play a match, and we've been really supportive and really excited and happy for Sophia Dunkley, who's kind of had this rise and has now sort of cemented her spot in the England side, but for Fran Wilson that's meant that she's kind of been sat on the sidelines this summer, and that's been quite difficult for her. She's only 29. She probably would have hoped to have had a few more years playing for England, so it's a difficult one, and we don't know. We're speculating somewhat. We don't know whether that time in the bubble has contributed to her retirement. But I'm going to say this: that if it was me, and I was facing a winter away from home with 2 weeks quarantine before travelling having travelled to Australia, 2 weeks quarantine, and then potentially another 2 weeks quarantine moving between Australia and New Zealand from the Ashes to the World Cup, and then months, 4 or 5 months away from home, facing that whilst also kind of knowing that it was unlikely that I was going to get to play a game, then that wouldn't be a very attractive prospect for me. Don't know whether that's been a contributing factor, so that's pure speculation on my part. But I think it's a little bit of a sad, disappointing ending, and it's particularly disappointing in the sense that Fran Wilson is somebody who is so giving. She's given so much to English cricket. We hear this cliche when somebody retires, oh, they've been a great servant to the game, but she really has, because she is somebody who gives a lot and hasn't necessarily taken much back in that sense from English cricket. She's so generous and she's such a popular figure amongst the rest of the team. Yeah,
I thought it was really interesting. Mark Robinson took time out from his current job. Obviously he's now back in the men's game coaching Warwickshire very successfully, but obviously was the coach who kind of reselected Fran back in 2016 and selected her for the World Cup winning team in 2017, which was obviously one of the highlights of his career, and he tweeted this, and I thought it was really interesting. Congratulations, Fran Wilson, on your England career. Loved my time working with you. Always such a popular member of the squad and a selfless team player. And then he had also played an important part in winning the 2017 World Cup, especially in the semi-final versus South Africa when we were in big trouble. But it's that thing of like she was a selfless team player, and obviously, you know, if you're a coach, you kind of want those kind of players along with you. You know, if you're a coach, you need your superstars as well, because you know your superstars are the ones that, you know, go out and have those superstar performances. But selfless team players are also a big part of the makeup of a successful team, and that really sums up Fran for me. That she's even at points in her careers where, you know, we've spoken to her at points when she's been at kind of lower points in her career, when she was like frustrated about selections and things, but she's always been so positive. She's always had a smile on her face. She's always been, you know, friendly and ready to talk, and just such a nice person, and as you say, a very giving person. So that's, and I also want to mention the thing that you said there about her going to Middlesex. There are actually two players that went to Middlesex around that time, that both kind of had a lot of success from doing that. So Fran did that, and Fran got then reselected for England, but also Alex Hartley. She also moved to Middlesex, and that kind of reignited her career. And I think that's an important step to take, and I think that a lot of young players could learn from that. And I'm just going to pull one name out, not really picking on anybody in particular, but someone that I think could benefit from something similar, is Ellie Threlkeld. So Ellie Threlkeld's been around for, you know, a number of years now. She's played a lot of games in the Kia Super League. She's always been there or thereabouts. She's shown that she can make runs. She's hit the odd 50, but she's never quite. She needs to, like, if she's going to have an England career, she needs to make a little step up. And one of the ways to make that little step up is to put yourself outside your comfort zone, to take that brave step to go somewhere else. And I think someone like Ellie Threlkeld could really benefit from going, I'm going to step away from Lancashire, where I've been all my life so far. I'm going to take a brave, big step, and I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to work with some different coaches, and that can just make that little difference to push you up. Just, you know, push you up from the 10 on the scale to 11 to the point where you can wind up, you know, with that England selection and with that England cap that all those players so desperately want. So a brave move.
And what's really interesting actually is we weren't going to talk about this in huge detail. We're maybe going to talk about it in next week's podcast, but they've announced the new regional professional contracts this week, and we have seen a few players making that move, haven't we? We've seen people like so Abby Freeborn has moved from Lightning to Sparks, Marie Kelly has moved from Sparks to Lightning. There's been a little bit of a swap going on there. Marie Kelly's obviously spent her career kind of in and around the Warwickshire setup, and Sparks was kind of part of that, and has now made the decision to move. So we are seeing players making some of those brave steps.
And those aren't easy decisions, but they can make a huge difference. So, you know, good luck to all those players that do that, and some other players should take that on board, I think. Okay, well that's all for us this week. It's actually been quite a long one, hasn't it, Raph? So I'm sorry for your voice, but hopefully Raph will be back in full voice next week, and you can listen to a bit less of me. We will see you here again next week, same time, same place. Take care. Bye-bye.